are retired. We are greatly distressed to receive the information that the Oakland Parks and Recreation Department is contemplating closing down the putting green.
Testing 1, 2, 3. KPFA Bay City Blues program for August 1977. An interview with Walter Abernathy, Executive Director of the Port of Oakland. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Testing 1, 2, 3. An interview with Walter Abernathy. Okay, I guess where we'd like to begin is simply to explain what the Oakland Airport does now, what sort of services it, and how large it is now, and what the plans are for its expansion in the next 10 years, and why those things are important at this time.
Well, the airport, of course, historically, Oakland was basically the first airport in the Bay Area, and that was started 50 years ago next month. But that airport, the old North Field, became outmoded with time, and in the 60s, 50s and the 60s, we built a new airport in Oakland. Went out into the bay and reclaimed about 2,500 acres of land and filled the area so that we would have a runway with overwater approaches and departures, so we'd be free of noise problems and have really one of the safest airports in the country. The air was dubbed as sort of a white elephant at that point. We had about 312,000 passengers the very first year we opened, 1962, and of those, about 41% of them were charter flights. So only about 180,000 scheduled passengers. We have now developed that we have about 2.2 million passengers. About 2.1 million of those are scheduled flights, and most of those flights are intra-state. They're the 80% of our traffic is the PSAs and the Air Californias between here in Los Angeles, here in Orange County, here in San Diego, that type of service. We do have good services up to the Northwest. We have a couple flights to Hawaii, flights to Chicago. We do have a schedule of interstate flights, but it's inadequate at this point. So basically we're serving as a Pacific Corridor type airport with some interstate traffic to the eastern part of the United States and to Hawaii. We have a substantial amount of charter flights move through here. But basically, I think we feel that we're an underutilized airport in terms of scheduled flights. We need more flights. When the flights have been added, the East Bay people have responded and have supported them when good service was provided by the airlines.
Most passengers who come into Oakland would experience quite a pleasant sensation, in fact, in the sense that it's not crowded as is San Francisco, and it's not. Parking is relatively cheap and easy to find, and things are generally less hectic. How utilized are the facilities that can currently exist at the airport, and how many more flights and passengers could you handle with basically the facilities that are in place now?
Well, that's a difficult question in terms of you've got a number of constraints or problem areas in an airport. Now, in terms of the runway, we have a tremendous capacity in the airspace and the runway and the field side facilities. In terms of the parking lot, we have adequate capacity. We right now are adding a baggage carousel because we happen to have a constraint right at that point right now. We're limited in ticketing counters if new airlines would want to serve Oakland. So that's a limitation at this point. But basically, we are able to solve those problems with minor modifications up to probably, say, about 4 million passengers. And then we have plans on the drawing board to take us up to about 6 million with, it requires some investment at that point. Maybe we're talking about an investment of 50 to $55 million in facilities to accommodate a 6 million passenger airport. Well, that's a 300% basically increase over where we are right now.
Right. The San Francisco airport, which currently serves about 19 million, has had several development plans, one of which call for going up to 31, I believe, and another one up to 24.
Right.
And depending on which one of those you take, they're planning to spend somewhere between $47 and $90 million or some financing future development. How does the port feel about the appropriateness of the development in San Francisco, and what concretely would it do to your plans if everything that was planned by the Airport Commission in San Francisco went ahead, and who, if anyone, is supposed to sort out the needs of the different airports in the Bay Area, including San Jose, and if there is such a planning agency, what weight do their decisions have?
Well, there's certainly the planning agency, but in terms of control and regulation and implementing the plan is a problem area. There's no doubt about it. In the Bay Area, we probably have as an advanced stage of airport planning as anywhere in the United States. Really believe that to be the case. At least we're one of the first metropolitan areas to do the detailed airport planning that exist here. We started a study with federal financing that originated with the three airports themselves, and that was San Jose, San Francisco, and Oakland. And we started a planning process about what are we going to do to handle the aviation of the future. We ended up doing a first phase study as airports. We then joined with the Association of Bay Area Governments, and then subsequently MTC, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. And in total, we have spent probably over $750,000 developing an airports system plan for the Bay Area. And that plan has been adopted. It's not done by the airports, but it's done by these regional agencies with airport participation and financial help. The plan indicated that we didn't need another airport in the Bay Area, that the airports that we have, the three airports, had sufficient capacity to accommodate the growth. And in the first stages of the plan, there were some very heavy numbers thrown out of what was going to happen in the future.
I recall an estimate of $72 million for the Bay Area
And
as a whole.
even before that, there was one, I think, of $85 million. So the $72 million was a back down figure. Those figures have scaled down with time. The heavy numbers are not expected to happen quite as quickly. Then they've taken those gross numbers of what they think would happen to aviation in terms of passenger boardings and what have you, and then they've tried to allocate them to airports. Now this is where they have an implementation problem. And at first, they came up with a heavy growth burden on Oakland. In fact, we were supposed to have 24 million passengers, I think, by the year 1985 in the first cut at the allocation problem. They've now brought that down to a number, I think it's between 7 and 8 million passengers, and it's a time frame, 1985 to 1989, something like that. And I don't know if it's right or not. It might be more or less, but that's the best estimate. But the problem is that how you then cause that allocation to happen. Right now, it's totally in the laps of the airlines because they determine where the flights will be scheduled, and the planners can say that it's best for the region and it's best for the people of the East Bay not to have to go across the bridge and congest the highways and pollute the atmosphere and all that sort of thing, that there should be better service at Oakland. But if the airlines don't choose to put the flights into Oakland, that distribution obviously is not going to happen.
Right. I'd like to ask a little more about the airlines and their resistance, at least some of the airlines, to move to Oakland. The United Airlines, I meant, has been quoted the most often by the media in the Bay Area, and they say that they tried certain things at Oakland on a trial basis, but there wasn't the volume. They say that Oakland is expanding before they've developed the demand, and they don't know of any other place in the country where that's been done that way. And they imply that the advantages which Oakland can offer are inadequate to compensate them for the amount of investment they put in San Francisco and generally the aggravation that they guess would cause. Is that a united front on the part of the airline industry? Do they all feel that way? And can they back up the evidence that it just doesn't pay at this time to go to Oakland?
No, not really, I don't think. And United's quoted, United actually is put in, we don't think adequate, but United has been responsive to our service needs more than a lot of the other airlines. United's quoted most often because they're the biggest and they're the most visible. But no, it's the statement, if that's what they said, is not really borne out by the facts. I think whenever an adequate level of service has been put in at Oakland, now I'm not talking about some Mickey Mouse flight at some odd hour, or a flight that goes to a city and doesn't return, those type of things. But when a pattern of service has been put in, the people of the East Bay have responded very favorably to it. Our load factors, for example, I think we've proven it in the Southern California market, is that we still don't have the number of flights that San Francisco has to Southern California, but I think you have to say we've got a good pattern of service. And that pattern of service has very, very high load factors. At one time, it had the best load factors that were available from the Bay Area. I don't know if that's the case now, but they're certainly very respectable and providing a substantial volume of business for the airlines that are using it. Now,
load factors are an average number of passengers on a flight.
Right. So wherever, if you put in, the traveling public is quite sophisticated now, and you need to have a frequency of service. You can't just put in, for say, a major market like a Chicago or a New York, you can't just put in one flight and expect that you're going to capture that, whatever that represents as the share of the market, that you're going to capture it because of that. Because people want to leave at 9 o'clock, they don't want to leave at, and you've got a flight at 7, they're not going to leave at 7. And they want to be able to return and know that they can come back with some degree of discretion. So you've got to have a good pattern of service with backup flights in case the person misses one flight. He can get to another flight so that he ends up where his car is. He doesn't come in to have his car at one airport and have to take a plane into another one. So all of those factors indicate that you got to have a pattern of service. And when we have it, it's been supported.
Another party or set of parties that need convincing and whose assistance you need in these plans are the Federal Aviation Administration and the CAB, the Civil Aeronautics Board. And the FAA's role in terms of financing part of the development, I'd like to ask you about a little. Simply, is from their point of view, don't they see Oakland as simply a competing facility, and that to put a substantial amount of money for flights that are going to San Francisco now or otherwise would is simply, from a national point of view, sort of like subsidizing two people to compete with each other and unnecessary?
Well, not really. If you look at all the numbers, you're going to need all the airport facilities that we can have in the Bay Area, even with the scaled down numbers, and that the region and the FAA certainly recognizes this, and the airlines do too, is that the Bay Area has just a tremendous asset. We have, right in the population center of the 9-county area, 4.5, 5 million people, we've got a international airport that is as conveniently located as you can find, with overwater approaches and departures. We really, from an environmental standpoint, are probably, and we have our little problems, but we're probably as clean environmentally as an airport as you can find. Well, to have that in the middle of a population center is a tremendous asset, and it's going to be used. The question is, and it's going to be used very heavily in the future. The question is it going to be a gradual growth? Are we going to get the type of service that we need and should have right now, or is it going to be a spillover? And that is that San Francisco becomes super saturated and then the growth just overflows to Oakland. Well, that's not a very orderly process. We can't very well finance and build. At one time, their growth, their annual growth, was more than our total traffic. So it's the type of thing we're opposing for two reasons: the spillover. One, it's almost unmanageable to have facilities just instantly available, and two, we think that the people of the East Bay deserve flights right now. And one other thing on the FAA, the FAA was the agency that came to the airports several years ago and said, you're not going to get another nickel of federal money for your airports until you come up with a regional plan for aviation. And with that carrot or stick or whatever you want to call it, we then did this regional plan that in effect said, that's the ABAG MTC plan, that says that Oakland should be the growth airport.
The other approach to the federal government at this point is the petition to the Civil Aeronautics Board. Can you explain briefly what that is asking for, and given that it will take possibly a couple of years to decide how you're proceeding in the interim?
Right. Well, we have filed a major petition with the CAB in which we have identified 22 markets, 22 cities where we think we need service and can support it. So there are major destinations in the United States. And we've shown, and we've done an economic analysis, a very substantial effort to show that with service in those markets, that we've got a population base with a propensity to fly that would support sound economic service. We've identified those cities, and basically what we've said is that right now we're just overwhelmed with authority. There's all sorts of airlines that have authority to serve Oakland, but most of that authority is dormant, or it's being exercised by the airlines serving the East Bay through San Francisco. Well, we have said, let's just remove the authority. If the airline has the authority in these 22 markets, they're not using it, we want it removed. We don't want them to have the authority here. And then after our petition was filed, we had a number of major airlines who don't now serve the Bay Area file in support of our case and say that they would serve those markets and serve them exclusively through Oakland. Now, I think 20 of the 22 cities, we have airlines that want to serve the Bay Area through Oakland in our petition. And then we're joined by, well, just generally we've got Allegheny. Allegheny has filed, which is a major East Coast airline, Braniff, Frontier, Texas International, and Northwest, and Hughes Air West, and PSA are the airlines that have seek the authority in these markets.
This does take a long time to resolve, and the very structure of airline regulation may even change in the interim. Is there, which is basically coming to my next question.
Mm-hmm.
There is some talk about reform, or a lot of talk about reform of airline regulation, or various schemes coming to deregulation. Would some of those schemes, if enacted, take away the CAB's authority or policing power and ability to grant and take away authority and that nature, and in a sense make it even harder, take the stick away from the carrot and stick approach of expanding the airport?
Basically, I think that's right. The whole thrust of the regulatory reform or deregulation, and there's a bill in the Senate, and then a bill was just introduced in the House about 10 days ago. But the basic thrust of the bills, and they have different provisions, but the principle is to get the government out of the business of regulating airlines, or lessen its role, and give the airline management more authority in running their operations. So really the petition that we have is with the CAB is to help us implement the regional plan and take into account the public service aspects of the airline industry, and as it applies to the Bay Area. So unless the bills were modified in some way, and we're seeking to have them modified, it could adversely affect our case, and if that was the law today, we would not have the strong petition that we now have.
How much does the viability of the demand estimates at this point depend on something like the CAB petition going in your favor? In other words, would we be building a lot of facilities that wouldn't get used unless there was some sort of large-scale change in those airlines' attitudes?
No, we do the planning and we do the promoting and all of those sort of things, but when you start to construct and finance, then we've got a pretty acid test that we have to meet, and that is that we have to be satisfied that that demand is going to be there when we spend the money, because the port does not have taxing powers, and we have to raise money in the municipal bond market. We have some very strict earnings tests, so we have to be able, when we invest the money, we have to show that there's revenue to pay off that investment. It's almost as a private financing would do, except these are with tax-free municipal bonds. So when we move into a construction phase of a project, although we've done planning years in advance, we've got to be satisfied that there is a revenue flow. So we cannot afford to build far ahead or far ahead of demand. We've got to immediately turn it over into revenue-producing facilities.
There's been a lot of discussion in the media, and some people have interpreted some of the reports that have been done for the port to say that the demand estimates and the preliminary studies that would accompany revenue bonds, putting revenue bonds in the market and doing the construction, say that the airport expansion is not, at this time, appear to be nearly as solid as the expansion in the marine terminals has been, and that it's in the nature of the airline business that your revenues are much more uncertain at a later point in time, and that in Oakland in particular, it just doesn't seem, there seems to be an inordinately large risk. Could you talk a little more about what the risks are and how they compare to the other sorts of investments the port might be making, or even how they compare to other airports and their expansion plans?
Well, we set rates for the airlines, and we right now do not have the airlines on long-term agreements. So theoretically, they could all fly away tomorrow, I guess, and there we'd be without any use. That's one extreme. I guess that's a risk. But I think we see that with the facilities that we have and the business that we can offer the airlines, that's not likely to happen. That's pretty far-fetched. And as I mentioned, 80% of our traffic is in the California commute market. That's a growing market. Last month, for example, not last month, last June were the figures that I recall. We had about a 17% increase in total traffic over June the previous year. So the traffic is growing here. And then when we set these rates with the airlines, we follow a cost center concept in that we want various areas of the airport to support themselves financially, to come out. And that's been happening. The airport has been, when we set the rates, we set them so that we make money, or we cover our investment, I should say, and cover our costs with a return factor on some of our revenue bonds, which we have to have, to cover those costs, and we adjust the rates accordingly. Now, we've been able to do that, and what we have to do is when we make the next series of investments, to be sure that again, we can set rates that will, or generate traffic that will cover those costs. That becomes a business judgment that you have to make. We look at that extremely carefully before we make those investments, because we're using municipal bonds, we're using federal money to a certain extent, and the combination has to come out that the airport supports itself.
Isn't it true that technically that any bonds the port issues under the current authorization are backed by the revenues of the entire port and not just the airport? So in a sense, there is something to fall back on to look at it one way, or on the other hand, the airport could be being subsidized by the other operations of the port if things didn't work out as planned. I noticed that the Examiner asked a question of that sort, and other people have speculated that this would slow down growth in other sectors of the port, or slow down other things that might be done with the port's resources.
Sure, that's right. In fact, and that makes the bonds. We have a very solid bond rating, and that's one of the reasons we do, is that we're a very diversified municipal operation with marine terminals and real estate and commercial and income. That all of that income is pledged to the bonds. But what we then do as a business practice is that we then try to take each one of these various enterprises that we have and make each one self-sufficient. And we have been able to do that with the airport. But if we were wrong, and I don't think we will be, but if we were wrong, and the unlikely event that all the airlines would just fly away and we didn't have any service, we would have, the bonds would be backed by our total revenues, marine terminals and others. But in the early years of the airport didn't pay for itself. And back in the 60s, and it was in the red, and it was supported then. And the money had to come from somewhere, and it came from other port operations.
The port expansion in San Francisco, the
Airport?
the airport expansion, pardon me, that I was speaking of earlier, is the revenue bonds are going to be placed before the voters as that city's charter requires. Do you think that's a wise move on their part, and would you recommend that sort of thing for Oakland?
Well, I don't know whether it's wide. I don't know that much about the San Francisco politics and whether there's I don't even recall if there's an underlying pledge of the voters in case the airport should default on the bonds. But I don't, in this case in Oakland, I don't think that it's necessary. We have an extremely strict earnings test that we have to meet before we can issue bonds. We have to have net revenues 50% greater than our projected bond service. So that's a tremendous cushion that the bondholders have that we have to be able to demonstrate before we can issue those bonds. So that serves as quite a limiting factor on the way we set rates, and two, in our capacity to go forward with projects.
Do you think that, I understand you're not a politician, I was wondering what your sense of Oakland's politic, or from talking to politicians and leaders, has any of them expressed a concern that there haven't been votes on port bonds, and basically they're 1957 series bonds that are being used?
Basically, no.
Has that come up as a political?
Not really. Not really. The bonds, of course, are not backed in any way by the credit of the city, and they're backed strictly by the port's capacity to earn income and retire those bonds. And we have then these limitations or limitations of covenants to the bondholders or contracts that we will only issue so many bonds based on our earnings, and that serves as a very substantial break on our capacity to borrow.
I'd like to talk a little bit now about what the airport, or the development of the airport, would do for citizens of Oakland. The port is a public agency and an agency of the city government. In the last mayoral and council races, candidates took somewhat different stances in general terms about future development of the port, but in both cases they were emphasizing jobs and the growth of jobs. What are the estimates of what would happen at different stages of airport development, and what measures would be taken to ensure that development meant jobs for Oakland citizens?
Well, one is that we've done projections ourselves of what it would be in terms of jobs, and we're not happy with those projections. So we recently retained a consultant, a third party, to go and make a study. And these studies have been done around the country and demonstrated, so they're not reinventing the wheel. But do a study and take our project to expand the airport from its current level to 6 million passengers, which is the mid-80 range. We have some figures that show that it might result in 1,700 to 5,500 jobs somewhere. That's a broad range, obviously. So that's why we want a third party to come up and tell us what the answer would be. I think it's safe to say that, and it's been demonstrated around the country, that an airport is a major source of employment for an area. I'm talking just in addition to just the people that work on the airport itself, the flight attendants, to the airport personnel, to the maintenance people. There's the hotels and the ancillary businesses that like to nestle up next to an airport because of the convenience. So it's a major source of employment. But I want the third party to quantify the number for us.
The general plan, or the master plan, as I read it, says for that 6 map figure, 6 million passengers a year, the increase over the present level is 1,700
Right.
jobs. But that's figured for an area of 3 census tracts, 2 of which are in San Leandro, adjacent to the airport. And when one considers that the current, or as of the 1971 study, the rate of Oakland residency among airport employees was only around 20%. In terms of all the other things being equal, that would seem to imply only 300 or 350 jobs for people in Oakland, unless those other factors changed in terms of the development being located in the city and Oakland residents being given a special training or a preference in hiring or something. What is the port's response to those things, which have been increasingly demands in Oakland?
Well, it's a real difficult issue on the Oakland residency thing in terms of applying that to private industry. We've been trying to do it with our own. Well, one, you legally can't do it to municipal employees or government employees. You can't impose a residency requirement on them, as I understand the law. You can require them to live within a reasonable distance, and so it's even more difficult. Which, if you can't legally do it to your own people, it's even more difficult to attract industry and say, oh, by the way, a condition of your leasing our property or you're operating in this area is that you hire only Oakland, or that you hire a percentage Oakland. That's a difficult thing to do. We're trying to come up, and we have some ideas about programs that would be encouraging to industry that locate here, that would lead them in the direction, make it attractive for them to hire Oakland people. But you have a situation where the airport then is, obviously, it's bordered by, it's in Oakland, bordered by San Leandro and Alameda. So there are going to be a lot of people that work in that airport area that are going to live in those nearby communities. And just as the airport is holding itself out as a regional airport facility, trying to attract business from Contra Costa County, trying to attract business from either northern Santa Clara and Marin counties and other cities than Oakland, it would be very difficult to say, all right, we're going to attract the business from these areas, but we're going to be provincial in our hiring practices, and that only Oakland people are going to work at the airport. I think it's not going to really happen that way. We have to come up with a program that encourages the industries that locate there to hire Oakland people.
Given the large number of jobs at the airport which are skilled labor of one sort or another and take a substantial amount of training, is there a concrete program which could be written, or which the port plans to write into expansion plans, that involve training of Oakland residents for these sorts of jobs beyond what programs currently exist?
We have not considered any new programs at this point. There are a number of programs that are available for those type of jobs, particularly the maintenance, the aircraft maintenance, and those type of jobs that already exist. It well may be that when we go from 2 to 6 million and the traffic does develop, that we're going to find at the time that starts to happen, just like we're not making the heavy investment now to build the facilities for it in early anticipation, but as that traffic does start to develop, that we're going to have to provide additional training facilities. We have not yet provided for it, though.
Can you envision a situation where leases, there were incentives written into leases or incentives written into property negotiations whereby revenues to the port, income to the port by a tenant would be traded off in favor of preferential hiring for Oakland residents?
No, I don't think that we would do that. Now, that has been suggested, but I really think we have an obligation to lease the property for its fair market value. And it's difficult to start to quantify in those terms what a social program and say, well, we're going to give you a 10% discount on the fair market value of the property if you hire so many percent Oakland. Then you've got just a horrendous thing of trying to administer it, to try to find out, well, did they move? Were they in Oakland actually there? And I think what you've got to do, you've got to come up, to be workable, you've got to come up with a program that is an encouraging thing, and it just makes good economic sense for the people to hire in Oakland. we've attracted a lot of industry over here in the marine terminal field and a lot of commercial development in recent years. We've invested a lot of money in facilities to do it. And if these offices are in Oakland, there's going to be a tendency, it's going to just be it's going to be easier to hire Oakland people because this is where the industry is located. We need to have a referral process, and that's what we're attempting to do, is to work out a referral process so that, and encourage these industries to use it, that whenever they have a job vacancy, they pick up the phone and they call the XYZ referral agency, which then refers Oakland people on a top priority basis. And I think a program like that would pay real dividends and would be not a real pie in the sky, but could be a workable thing that would turn into tangible results for Oakland residents.
Why do you think traditionally the airport has had even fewer, a lower percentage of residents compared to the other sectors of the port?
Well, it's that path of least resistance. If we move an industry in the marine terminal area that's right in the middle of Oakland, let's say, or Jack London Square, or American President Line moved its headquarters from San Francisco to downtown Oakland, as a result, is the second phase after they moved their marine terminal over here. They're going to have a higher percentage of Oakland people just because where they are. If you move, the airport happens to be on the boundary of Oakland. It's right next to Alameda and right next to San Leandro, and it's going to be very convenient, more convenient for people to live in those communities and work at the airport. If you get a job at the airport, you might find the most convenient place to live would be Alameda in terms of access.
Okay, I'd like to move on to the last set of questions that I had, which we mentioned Alameda, and part of the city of Alameda is Bay Farm Island, immediately adjacent to the airport, and there have been plans for substantial real estate development in areas very close to the flight paths. And I was wondering if you could explain the terms of the settlement that were reached with Harbor Bay All Associates, first of all, and then explain what measures the port expects to take in the next 8 or so years in the period covered by the plan, assuming that federal noise standards will stay roughly what they were.
Well, we had a major controversy and worked very long to attempt to influence that development to be replanned so that portions of the property that are being planned for residentially would be planned for another use. We thought that the residential development portions of it were too close to our projected and existing noise patterns. Again, even with that project, from an environmental standpoint, we're in pretty good shape. But anyway, we wanted to be pure if we could be. We didn't want to have any noise problems. That's why we built the airport out in the bay in the first place. At any rate, that project that fill for that development started back, I guess it started back in the mid-'60s, right before the creation of BCDC, and was planned many years before that. In effect, was a project in being, and substantial investment had been made in creating the land, and it was ready for development. We opposed the residential development, said it could be replanned. The developers said that our projections were overstated, that we weren't going to create the noise that we projected. And we reached a compromise with them, and it's not the best of all worlds, I'm sure, from their standpoint or ours, but it was a compromise, recognizing that there was a difference of opinion between two major agencies, two substantial parties, the city of Alameda being one and the Port of Oakland and the city of Oakland being another, is that that here set a major investment, many millions of dollars had been invested based on their assumption they could develop residentially, is that we opted for an agreement that by which they provided to us a noise easement for a price over a substantial portion, that portion which we think will be the noise impacted area. So in other words, if you buy a home out there in this area, and there will be residents, and I think our preference would be that it would go away, that there wouldn't have been anything. It hadn't been filled in the first place, but that wasn't the factual situation that we faced. Here it was. so that there would be a noise easement, and when you buy a home, that the investor in that home would have given up his right, or we would have acquired really the right, legal right, to make noise over that residence. Now, you say in conformity with the federal standards. Right now, there's only state standards.
Pardon me, that's what I'm...
Yeah, state standards. And the state standards recognize that, first, that they set these standards that you're not by 19, and they're restricting, they're getting quieter and quieter, in other words, is that airports by a certain date, I think it's 85, have to have no non-conforming uses within this noise standard that they set. They recognize, however, that a residence with a easement over it is a conforming use. So you can, by the state standards, have property subjected to a degree of noise with a noise easement. That brings it into conformity. So that's what we were using. When we came to the settlement and arrived at this compromise, we used the state noise standards as the basis for reaching an agreement.
What is there any way of estimating what the total cost of handling the noise problem is going to be by 1985 or 1986 in terms of paying for soundproofing of people's homes and occasionally buying out properties and the other costs involved? Well,
we think with the noise easement that when we have a price on that, I think it's $450,000. We think with the noise easement that we will have spent the necessary money to protect the airport. We already have some noise easements that we bought several years ago. And there is an airport land use commission in this county which regulates, to a degree, land use planning around airports. And they have adopted a plan earlier this month, I should say, which imposes also a requirement that there should be insulation in future developments. So the soundproofing is being provided as a condition of building in these noise-sensitive areas, that and a noise easement.
So that, is there any way that soundproofing could become a cost that the port would have to bear for certain homeowners?
No, it's anticipated that the developer, whoever's building, if they're building in this noise-sensitive area, they're in effect put on notice that through an easement and through us having the right to make the noise, and they're also required to insulate their homes.
What is to prevent individual homeowners from suing the port over questions of noise? I mean, does the settlement with the city and the developers and the port have any impact on individuals' rights to complain or to sue?
That gets into some very technical legal issues, but we really will have in the deed an easement. So if you bought a home, we would have acquired this right. If you sold the home, our right to make noise would continue, so that subsequent purchasers would also have granted away their right to sue us for inverse condemnation for airport noise. So we feel that with that easement that we are protected from those suits.
How about the rest of Bay Farm Island and the parts of Alameda that aren't included in the easement? There's still substantial noise over a lot of those areas, and if the standards were to become stricter yet again, wouldn't those people have grounds?
Oh, sure. If we don't have an easement over it, then we're not protected, and we somehow have to face that problem. What we have done is to try to project as best we can the amount of noise we'll make at a particular point in time and protect ourselves with an easement. If the airport grows real fast and the jet engines aren't quieted, then we could be wrong. We could be making more noise than we project, and then we've got to do something about it. If we grow slow and the jet engine's quieted, and there's some projections that's going to happen by this date and that date, and the airlines and the government now are wrangling on that very issue, and so we don't know the answer. We know at some point in time it's going to be quieter, but we don't know when it is. But if it happens sooner, then maybe we've spent money to acquire more protection than we really needed. So it's just a judgmental thing that we've exercised after quite a bit of thought and study.
Okay, one final question. One of the reasons that this issue remains so interesting is that the developer of the property made a lot of news himself, directly and indirectly, and pretty much sort of spent his way through Oakland politics in the process of reaching this settlement. Has he? A couple questions about Mr. Cowan. One is, has he been heard from since the settlement? And two, what do you think of what is your evaluation of the effect of the campaigns which he sponsored and issues around the port? And do you think those things will come up again? Questions of charter reform that were raised by groups which he was involved in sponsoring. Do you think those issues should be raised again, or do you think they will be raised again in the next couple of years? And if given there was no outside.
Building that project. We have a little planning committee that's been inactive during the summer months, but it's a planning committee of the city of Oakland and the developer and the port, primary parties to that lawsuit, really, to sit down and to see where we have common interest and to try to plan around the problems, because with the development of their size and developments of our size, we've got some rough edges, and we've got to constantly meet and work to try to sort them out. That compromise agreement, settlement agreement, was a lot of it's based on good faith between the parties, and so far I think they've honored that agreement very well, and we've attempted to do the same. In terms of the charter amendment, I don't think that there was a real basis for the proposed revisions to the Oakland charters that affected the port. It was sort of a political attack. The developer and the people who were handling that project were charging away at every front in terms of trying to protect their investment, and I would have probably done the same thing if I'd have been in their shoes. But they have not, as far as I know, attempted to again attack the port in any way. In fact, part of the agreement is that they recognize that the airport is going to develop to this level that we've been talking about, and they've agreed to not object in any way to a development of that size. Now, they haven't given away their rights to never object if supersonic transports come in, or if we have 24 million passengers, those sort of things. They certainly, we could have problems in the long-range future, but at this point they've agreed to the type of planning that we're doing, and have been very good about it.
Has the mayor or any of the new council people ever expressed any interest in changing the port charter and the charter reforms, the charter as affects the port, in the ways that were suggested, since they were in some sense allied with, in a general sense, with the people involved in it, and since it did seem to imply that more power would be given to the mayor or the council?
Well, I've never known that they were allied with the Harbor Bay Isle people at all.
No, I just mean in the sense of being active members of the county Democratic Party. I don't mean in the sense of being.
Well, no, they really haven't. They've all our dealings with the city council, the new mayor, the previous mayor, they've all been very supportive of the projects that we've undertaken, airport, marine terminals. And basically what we're doing is, it makes good sense, and they seem to be fully supportive, and I haven't seen any indication that there's got to be a major upheaval or change in the basic structure of the port. The port's been a pretty successful entity that's been a pretty valuable asset to the city of Oakland, and I think everyone I've talked to anyway from the city hall and the leadership of the community feel that it's the type of thing that should be fostered and nurtured.
Thanks very much.
And opening those, we agreed in that after we figured out the kind of money we had. And you're coming up with a lot of baloney here.
Well, you may think it's baloney. I expressed to the council a week ago that I intended to bring up the restoration of the park and recreation cuts. I think they are a matter of high concern to a lot of people in this city, and they, I'm sure, are concerned to the members of this council.
In response, Mr. Sutter, I think this entire budget procedure is of high concern to this council, and this council has spent a great deal of time in the last 6 or 8 months facing the problems that's confronting the city in regards to the financing. So I don't think it's appropriate to belittle the council's involvement in this total process during the last
the council's involvement in the
6, 7, 8 months. We'll have any other members of council want to speak on the subject? Okay, Mr. Yelton, would you like to start off? And after Mr. Yelton, Mr. Stewart. All right, Mr. Stewart first and Mr. Yelton second. Mr. Stewart, good evening.
Good evening, gentlemen, Mr. Vice Mayor, and gentlemen of the City Council. I am John Stewart, Sr., and I am President of the Diamond Improvement Association, Incorporated. I have here that my remarks are to be, I did not know that we're going to be on the number one, but I will continue and say this, that I would like to, first of all, read you a letter which Mr. Lundberg, Carl Lundberg, had written to the mayor. I don't know whether you, Councilman, has had it in the past. May I read it, please?
Please go ahead. I request that you keep your remarks within 3 or 4 minutes, though.
The Honorable Mayor John Reading. Dear Mayor Reading, the Altenheim Board of Directors at their last board session wished to express their deep concern regarding the possible closing of the Oakland City Fire Station on Champion. The closing of this fire station would present a very serious threat to our residents in an Altenheim home located on 1720 MacArthur Boulevard. I'm sure you are aware that immediate response to a distress call is imperative, with all the residents who have from mild to severe ambulatory problems. 3 to 5 minutes could be the difference in life or death. There have been calls to the fire station on Champion, and the response has been most gratifying. We are extremely pleased with our outstanding fire and rescue service. Sincerely yours, Carl G. Lundberg, Managing Director. We would like to present at this moment $3,492 signatures of a concerned citizenry in petitions for the keeping of the Diamond Firehouse engine number 14, and we'd like to keep that open, please. Would the city clerk please take the number? We must take a realistic view of the drastic implications that would take place if this firehouse were removed. Firemen do not only put out fires, they render all kinds of services such as resuscitation by heart attacks, swimming pool accidents, lockouts, etc. I have personally noted in the analysis of our preliminary budget of 1976-77 of several duplications of services which could be incorporated in our own city hall, and believe these changes would more than compensate for the cost of keeping the firehouse open. I beseech you gentlemen to please go back and review this whole problem with the thought in mind of the many concerned citizens and taxpayers in our area. I thank you gentlemen for your patience in listening to me, and I thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. I appreciate your comments. I'd like to ask Mr. Yelton now, please. Ladies and gentlemen, again, I would remark that I have here approximately some 25 or 30 people who have requested to speak this evening. I'm going to request all speakers to limit their remarks to 3 minutes, and the chair will time it.
Mr. President and City Council, thank you for the opportunity to come in and speak. I am Frank Yelton, member of the Diamond Improvement Association, also a board member of the Diamond Business and Professional Association. The Diamond Merchants Association is a shorter name. I will use that. My wife and I own property and businesses in the Diamond District and have respect to the whole community. My 86-year-old mother lives in the area, owns and lives in there, and like many other elderly retirees and residents, depend on the safety and the services of the firehouse and police in the area. In January of 1976, when I sat in this City Council work session and heard the unanimous decision of the Council to eliminate 3 firehouses, one of which was Diamond 14 on Champion Street, I asked who, if anyone, surveyed the Diamond area. Certainly it couldn't have been the councilman. I don't think they were out there and saw it. Maybe it was the fire chief. That fire chief has retired. We do have a new one. Now I ask again, who did survey it? Look at page 1 of the sheets which I have given you there on the long sheet. You have a map. Look around the fire station, see the great number of circles. Those represent, in every case, dangerous places. Places which call for immediate action by the fire department. When the word of this got back to the Diamond District, the merchants asked me to represent them. The Diamond Improvement Association at once joined in and petitioning began. Tonight we present you with this 3,492 signatures, very short of 5,000 as of today, and the petitions are still in circulation. An awful lot more of these folks would be here tonight, but for their ages or their ability to get down here, they are lacking the transportation. I know the entire Diamond area is against number 14 closure, as well as the Oakmore homeowners, which you have a copy of a letter, and the Lincoln Highland Association, of which you have a copy letter. And in both cases, they have also use of the number 14 fire station firehouse. I wonder how many are here tonight that really want to see number 14 station closed. Show of hands. Who wants to see number 14 station closed? I might ask how many are here from Diamond District. Might stand. Thank you, folks. This is pretty darn good support. Diamond is a small town.
Mr. Yelton, your time has exceeded the 3 minutes, so
Just a little bit more. This is a very small town area, like a small town, with the big long store, the 2 supermarkets, the 2 banks, 2 loan offices, post office, a total of 152 businesses. On page 2, you will note that there are 11 nursing, convalescent, and senior citizens' homes. On page 2, you'll notice 5 public schools, 6 private schools, 5 children's nurseries, and 3 swimming pools. All of these within a couple of minutes run from fire station number 14. This is my survey. This is what I found. And direct access in either direction on MacArthur Freeway. Also the Diamond Park and Diamond Canyon area. Why did R&S ad say that fire and police protection will not be reduced? That was very, very plain. You'll find that on page 4 of your copies there. Will not be reduced. And yet this is already voted to be reduced. It's a good question. Isn't it true that 41 engines out of 41 engines and fire engines and so forth in the city, that they rate 8th among the resuscitation calls and 301 fires in 1 year? Look at the map again and see how number 14 is surrounded by the potentially dangerous locations. Last month, the same station had 107 calls in 30 days. Please review this. One other question I'd like to know is why October is set as a possible extension date instead of considering the continuation of this station.
And Mr. Riley, would you like to respond to that question? Why the fire The
President,
closing of
members
the
of
station
council,
was extended to 1 October.
City Council has made a preliminary determination to allow the stations to remain through September 30th or October 1st, primarily because that coincides with the high fire season.
Yeah. Mr. Yelton, let me ask you a question first. I'm trying to categorize everyone according to the subject matter. Are you and Mr. Stewart the only speakers on this subject that have signed up?
I don't know.
It's the only ones that I see here. All right.
I believe so.
Let me just respond to you in saying that the city manager has said it was, when this question was first approached before the city council, when the council addressed themselves to financial cuts because of the budget restraints, the council at the time supported the recommendation, which was to reduce or eliminate the 2 firehouses. At that time, being the councilman from the district, as you're aware, I voted against that. My position has not changed, Mr. Yelton. For the sake of this evening, the council last week had decided to extend the life for another, 120 days. The subject will be before us again. You will be notified in advance. You may make the necessary appropriate comments. At that time, I will be with you as far as seeing if we can continue the life of these firehouses. Tonight, this council will not address themselves to that subject because it would not be appropriate.
I'm sure that both organizations will be very happy to meet with you at any time, any date that you set, and with any of you gentlemen, we'd like to go over this if it's possible.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
It's sure that it is a highly vulnerable section, as you can see by your map there.
Fine.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you. Now, let me ask again, is there anyone here who has signed up that wants to speak on the subject of the closing of the firehouses? Mr. Roscoe, is that why you spoke up, or you signed up? Would you like to address yourself to that now, please? Again, I remind you the time limit of 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. McCagan.
For the benefit of the,
my name is George Roscoe. I'm a captain in the Oakland Fire Department. I'm the president of Local 55 International Association of Firefighters, the Union for Oakland Firefighters. As you gentlemen, I think, are well aware, Local 55 is opposed to the closing of any fire stations in the city of Oakland and any reduction in the personnel. 14 engine, as the interest is created here tonight, is not an exception, but I've done a little bit of work on it. In the last 4 years that we have figures available for, according to our annual report in the fire department, the number of responses for 14 engine in the Diamond District has increased by 43% in just 4 years. These figures have been increasing every single year, not only for 14 engine, but for every engine company. This engine company, as was stated before, is in a district that does have a lot of convalescent hospitals, has a lot of elderly people. As a matter of fact, this year alone, I did a little research yesterday, the resuscitator calls have increased 33% since June 1975 until this date. So you can see that this is a valuable service, as is the rest of the fire department. I think on the meeting on May 25th, it was indicated that there was a budget surplus of $1.7 million. I think with the advent of the 12.4% assessed valuation average increase in the city of Oakland, that money can be found to keep these fire stations open and manned to protect the city of Oakland and the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roscoe. There isn't any room for levity, but I wonder if you would all applaud if you knew what the requests the firefighters have made toward the city for their salary, and we are at an impasse at this time because the city will not meet their requests or requirements.
I wonder if they would applaud if they knew what the city offered us. Thank you.
Well, they understand our problem. I wish you would. All right, Mr. Tom Holler from the East Bay Chapter, National Safety Council. I only see one on that subject. If I am incorrect, I'd appreciate someone raising their hand. Following this gentleman, I'd like to have Mr. Joe Sewell Jr. on Oakland Jobs Alliance and Sharon Hogan on the same subject. Mr. Holler.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the City Council. Some 54 years ago, a group of Oakland citizens founded my organization because they felt there was quite a need for public safety, specifically for public accident prevention. I believe that need is even more keenly felt today. Last year, according to Health Department figures, in the city of Oakland, some 226 persons died accidentally. Of that total, 6 were killed while working. The remaining 220 were killed while at home, on the road, in places, in public places, recreation, and so on. Yet, at the moment, most of the attention of the country is riveted on work safety. With some amount of levity, it has been pointed out that a recent definition by OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, defined ladder in some 30 pages, something that the dictionary managed to do in about 16 words. Our organization is being called upon regularly to be of some assistance, to be of a sort of Tennessee lawyer, if you will, to help the industry in this area, particularly the small employer, learn to live with OSHA. We're filling these requests. However, again, getting back, putting it in perspective, 226 dead last year in the city of Oakland, 6 at work, and of those 6, 4 were on the highway in traffic collisions. I would submit, members of the council, that the support that has been given for so many years to the Safety Council, and it's not a substantial amount of money, it's below $8,000, but because our organization depends almost entirely on a dedicated corps of volunteers, many of whom have personal involvement and reasons for personal involvement in accident prevention, we simply submit that this money would go an awfully long way to meet, at least on a minimal basis, a very great need. It would, for example, enable us to continue many of our programs. It would enable us to fill the requests we're going to receive for back-to-school information, for fire safety materials of enormous quantities, and other types of safety information. These requests will come from officials, from community organizations, from individuals. A minimal amount of support also, gentlemen, will enable the Safety Council to continue what we have now in the initial planning stages, and that is to embark on a massive, from our standpoint, a massive program to enlist young drivers in the city of Oakland into our 8-hour defensive driving course. We pointed out that at the present time, the greatest single killer of our young people, ages 16 through 24, now is the automobile. We feel something has to be done. Someone should do the job. We can do it. If
Sir,
we don't
you've exceeded the 3 minutes.
Fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Sharon Hogan on Oakland Job Alliance and Joe Sewell Jr. Are there any other speakers on the Joe Oakland Job Alliance?
I believe that Mr. Sewell is not present tonight. I'm not from the Diamond District. I speak for a full budget against reductions for the Oakland Jobs Alliance. I'm Sharon Hogan. I'm employed until June 30th as a legal stenographer in the City Attorney's Office. I am the only, I repeat, only secretary in the entire City of Oakland scheduled to be laid off. And my source for this statistic is Mr. Henry Gardner, assistant to the city manager. I've been working for the city for 2 years and 2 months. And despite the fact that there are 11 attorneys and only 5 stenographers in our immediate office, excluding Mr. Self and his secretary, and despite the fact that there has been a tremendous increase in litigation against the city, an increase in comp claims against the city, additional labor negotiations, and federal legislation to be carried out, all of which must go through the city attorney's office, I am to be laid off. The average deputy city attorney must do all of his own filing and frequently his own photocopying. Several girls work overtime consistently. The people who will be left to do the work in the office are overburdened now and will be more so. On May 25th, a hearing was held before the Civil Service Board for this city upon a request initiated by me. At that hearing, Mr. Self was mandated by the Civil Service Board to administer the civil service rules, in particular, to administer performance reviews in a uniform and equitable manner, in accordance with the city charter and the state law. He had not done so in 2 years that he was in office. Today, at the board's direction, and after my fight of over 1 year, Mr. Self conformed to the law. Now I am to be laid off. What do you think? If the city attorney, who is interpreter of the law for the city, will not follow the law unless forced to do so, then who in the city will follow it? As an Oakland resident, the mother of 2 children whom I support, as a city worker, and as a member of the Oakland Jobs Alliance, I object to the layoffs. Last week, at a so-called layoff orientation meeting, Mr. Gardner refused to let me read the civil service rules pertaining to payment of accrued vacation leave to some 80 persons who are to be laid off who are in attendance at the meeting. Section 801, subsection H2 of the Civil Service Rules states that a permanent employee is entitled to a lump sum payment for his accrued vacation. Because the city manager's office claims the city has no money, Mr. Newfarmer, in his layoff notice to the employees of May 28th, stated that we employees must, I repeat, must, take our sick leave, compensatory time, and vacation before the close of business June 30th. The law says otherwise. When I tried to read the people the law, Mr. Gardner threatened to throw me out of the layoff meeting bodily and refused to answer questions from the floor on why we couldn't continue to work through June 30th and to tell us why we can't be paid our vacation leave. Finally, I look around at who was at the meeting, who is to be laid off. Most of the faces were minority faces, black, brown, yellow, or the faces of women. The layoff list reads like the honor roll from the Vietnam War. Edwards, Crawford, Sewell, Morales, Delgado, the same honorable names drafted and who served, which Stokely Carmichael called a list for urban removal. Now our jobs are being removed. I quote from a city council meeting of March 30th, Councilman Cotto. Councilman Cotto stated that the city attorney had been requested to prepare a list of legal actions that the council could take in connection with personnel cutbacks and its effect on affirmative action. The city attorney stated a draft has been prepared and will be available next week. End quote. What effect, Mr. Self, do the layoffs have on affirmative action? I suggest the council, the press, and the public ask him what he said and what this layoff indeed will do to affirmative action in this city. The Oakland Jobs Alliance is pledged to fight the layoffs and pledged to work for full employment in Oakland for all people. And we will go to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. We would, however, like to work with the council, the port, the corporations, and the citizens of the city to bring about full employment. We ask your immediate help in stopping the layoffs and in approving a budget appropriate therefore.
Thank you, Ms. Hogan. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a policy of this body that requests that there not be applause or expressions of feeling toward the speakers. Now, I intend to support that, and if it continues, then we will have to take some action, a recess or something, and I don't think that's what you would prefer us to do. Robert Joyce, I don't know the subject matter, so I'll call on this gentleman. Okay, while he's coming down, we will address ourselves to the question of Parks Recreation budget, and I will call after Mr. Joyce, Mr. George Scotland, and Dr. Ken Ho.
Okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name's Bob Zoid. I don't think I need this. Can you hear me? I live at 2564 Charleston Street, which is in this fire district, and I've used that fire department 3 times in 21 years, once for an electric blanket fire, once for a weed fire, which is immaterial. The third one was about a month ago. My father-in-law had a stroke, collapsed on the pavement. He was lying in a pool of blood. I punched the operator button and told him I want the Diamond District Fire Department because they knew where my place was. I'm on a very difficult place to find. They were there in 5 minutes. They beat the ambulance by 10 minutes, and I do not want that fire department out of there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Scotland, and then Dr. Ho.
Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the City Council. As Chairman of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission, I want to call your attention the interest of the Commission towards some partial restoration of some of the budget reductions related to our leadership on playgrounds, secondary school gymnasium, and recreation centers. We recognize the city is still facing somewhat of a financial dilemma. Consequently, we're not asking restoration of the full $900,000 initially reduced in the Office of Parks and Recreation. The Commission, myself, we have a remaining concern for the quality of leadership and the scope of services we should be rendering to our young people of our city, particularly at the elementary and secondary school sites, and the broad range of services available at our 22 community centers and those programs servicing tiny tots, youth, and the elderly. It is this group of program elements that we feel are most critical to the health and welfare of our children. Having two leaders on the playground, generally male and female, allows us a program that includes trips and inter-playground and play competition, none of which is possible with one leader remaining on a facility. Now, in the interest of being brief and in deference to other speakers and your request, Mr. Vice Mayor, I'm going to summarize the Commission's appeal to you by suggesting a reasonable compromise which will provide the flexibility we need to serve our young people effectively. In short, we suggest the Council seriously consider the restoration of 1, 2 leaders on elementary playgrounds, foregoing Saturday, Sunday, and holidays, which will remain out of the budget. 2, a 50% restoration of junior and senior high school reduction. And last, that the reduction at recreation centers be reduced from 31%, totaling approximately $130,000, to no more than 15% reduction at those locations. If there are any questions or if you need any help with some figures, I or staff are here and we'd be happy to provide them for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scotland. Dr. Ho. Following Dr. Ho, Valerie Jones from Redwood Heights.
Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the City Council, fellow citizens, I'm Dr. Ken Ho. Tonight I'm wearing the hat of co-chairman of the Lincoln Square Recreation Advisory Council. Along with me, who are showing concern, are members of Lincoln Square Recreation Advisory Council sitting on the first row to my right, and many of the youth that use that facility are sitting upstairs to my left. We're here tonight to express our concern about the cuts, the deep cuts regarding the recreation center programs. It has affected not only the hours that are served there, but also lessening of the programs that are available to the children in the area. We feel that at this time, especially, it's critical that you restore the cuts. In looking over, for example, in some of the cuts that were taken, I noticed, for example, on number 5, action elimination of Westlake Center and Acorn housing programs. How many of the City Council members here sat around the table discussing the problems of Acorn housing projects? How can, in all clarity, you're going to cut programs which will affect those areas which you heard multiple complaints to begin with? I cannot understand that. The other thing I want to remind you, I quote the mayor, hire youth this summer. Well, the people you're laying off are the youth, the recreation leaders. I think we should be first in line to show the way to hire the youth this summer, and certainly it should be our recreation leaders. Many of you know I serve as chairman of the Citizens Crime Prevention Program here in Oakland, and certainly I can't think of any program of a better crime prevention nature to have a fine, sound recreation program. So I'm going to ask you, and we are asking you, to invest a few dollars now on our youth today, because they will pay up in big dividends. They will be our leaders tomorrow, and I hope you understand that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ho. Valerie Jones, and following Valerie would be Susan Levy from Montclair Recreation.
Mr. President and City Council members, I am a parent of primary school children, and I feel that it is important for the children of this city, because the citizens of No, the children of today are your citizens tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jones. Susan Levy? Susan Levy here? Thank you. Following Susan Levy will be Ms. Barbara Taylor from Brookdale Center.
I'm Susan Levy, a parent, citizen of Oakland, and I represent the citizens of Montclair. Okay, thank you. Did you hear me?
Yes, now, thank you.
Mr. Vice Mayor and council members, I believe it is essential to continue the after-school supervision and programs on the city's playgrounds. What better place for our youngsters than on familiar grounds, close to their homes, under the care and watchful eyes of dedicated recreation workers who really care. The after-school programs are popular with both children and parents. The children participate in many different activities, develop new skills, new interests, further friendships, and expand their relationships with the adult world. For parents, the playgrounds provide a safe and supervised place for their children to play. Parents know where their children are after school, what they are doing, and who they are with. And that knowledge is very important to every parent. On the junior and senior high school level, the after-school program provides the same good elements stated above. But to some students, these activities are the most important time of day. To the non-academic but athletically inclined student, the sports activities are a lifesaver. They provide direction for the future, adult contacts, and self-esteem. We all know the trouble youngsters can find. We read the reports in the papers. Why give them more time to find more trouble? Please keep our playgrounds open and our children usefully occupied. The sportsmanship and the skills developed are our hope for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Levy. Barbara Taylor from Brookdale Center, followed by Fred Bobette from Arroyo Viejo. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Vice Mayor,
Would
members of the
you
council.
speak a little louder, please?
My name is Barbara Taylor. I'm an instructional assistant with Oakland Public Schools and a sometime volunteer with Brookdale Recreation Center. I'm also a mother of 6 children that have been enjoying the services of the center. Most of the speakers here that have spoken so far about the budget cuts for the park department have said everything that I wanted to say, and I just wanted to add or suggest, that the budget, an adequate budget, be restored so they can properly operate the centers and give the children the enjoyment that they have for the past years. But I became, very concerned today when I was at Brookdale. I noticed that they served between 75 and 100 children in the 2 hours that I was there with only 2 staff members. And I was hoping that maybe they could get, some kind of additional help where they can, give the children a little more attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Mr. Bobette, followed by Wilbert Dunbar, also from Arroyo Viejo.
Mr. Vice Mayor and members of the City Council, my name is Fred Bobber. All I want to say is, how do you tell a kid that there's no balls because the centers are closed? We were all kids once, and we all know that we need recreation. Recreation does a lot of good. It really does. So you councilmen, you guys think about what you're doing before you do all this cutting in the recreation department. Because you think you got trouble now. You cut down the recreation, you're gonna really have problems. Think about it, fellas. Think about it good. Because we don't need no cuts in the recreation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Dunbar. Following Mr. Dunbar will be Virginia Buckner.
Mr. Vice Mayor and council members, my name is Wilbert Dunbar, employee at General Motors in Fremont, and I live in the Arroyo Viejo area. My kids play in that park, and I grew up on a playground. I understand what it means to have something to do, and somewhere to go, and activity to be in. And I'd like for my kids to enjoy the same thing that I did when I was coming up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Virginia Buckner, followed by Kenneth W. Smith. Good
Mr.
evening.
Vice Mayor, council members, I'm Virginia Buckner. I come as a representative from Montclair Recreation. My youngsters go to Thornhill School and use that playground as well as the park at Montclair. The proposal to cut the playgrounds is one that concerns me a lot because the whole family makes use of the recreation facilities that are offered to us. My understanding is that the proposal is to cut to 2 days a week certain playgrounds, and I have to say that this makes the playgrounds ineffective. Parents and children need to be able to count on these playgrounds every day. They don't need to have to follow a schedule. Working mothers need to be able to count on these to be open. Youngsters in the Hill area need a place where they can get together in large groups, medium-sized groups. It's not easy to find playmates for kids when you live in the hills where there are no sidewalks. They can't go to each other's houses very easily. They can gain independence and yet be supervised at the same time. We need to carry on the maintenance of these human resources, the children of Oakland. Keeping kids busy really is important. There are 2 youngsters in my neighborhood who are very light-fingered, who 2 summers ago set a fire that came very close to burning a house down. I feel much better since their working mother has discovered the recreation department. I'm safer in my house as a result of that. I'm sure many people benefit, even though they don't have youngsters of their own, from having youngsters kept busy with worthwhile activities. My own youngsters have benefited a lot. The PE department is not so good in Oakland schools, in many of the schools. My youngster goes and takes softball. It's the first introduction he's had to softball skills because he hasn't gotten it at his own school. The quality of our life has been improved by the recreation department, and I protest cuts in a budget for a department that has done so much for so many people. It serves a large segment of the populace. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Smith,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
And
sir.
following you, Mr. Smith, will be Theodore Miller.
Mr. Vice Mayor and members of the council, my name is Ken Smith, and I'm a volunteer member of the Dance and Music Committee in the Office of Parks and Recreation. And since we've had so many other speakers, I'll restrict my remarks only to the cuts made out of the dance and music budget. I'll give you, first of all, I want to applaud your action in restoring the cuts on some very useful programs such as the band concerts and the Rose Garden. Three items in the dance and music budget have been cut out that I'd like to be replaced, at least these 3. At the savings of a mere $1,100, the entire Recreation Dance Art program, a 30-year-old program which has brought a lot of goodwill to the city of Oakland by traveling around the state as an Oakland's unofficial ambassador, was cut, and $1,100 is not very much of a saving there. 30 people were affected by this cut, and the thousands before whom they performed. Partially cut at a savings of $5,282.56 was the African Modern Dance program, which served 600 children from tots to teens. This cut reduced the service to half of this number, so only 300 children will get a chance to participate in this program if the cut is sustained. This is also a program which is 30 years old and has been a resource for providing teachers and dancers in this area. Another partial cut was in the Cool Music Makers. Now, this is only a 3-year-old program, but it had a remarkable growth for its short life in East Oakland. In addition to losing children who learn, Oakland will lose the services of 2 gifted people, Susan Swerdlow and Bruce Silverman, who have received wide recognition and brought much credit on the city. The savings in cutting this budget is a mere $1,000. Oakland has gained a lot of notoriety as the city which is not for burning. And I'd like to know, if it's not for burning, what is it for? What it should be for is for cultural enrichment of all its citizens. It should be for encouraging community participation and involvement, which produces civic pride and produces a law-abiding citizenry which is proud of its city.
We take notice of things only, it seems, in our crisis-managed government when they become problems. We're always ready to, buy more guns for the police or flak jackets or whatever, but we don't want to put money in at the right end of the system, the end which encourages good citizen participation and community involvement, and I think that's what Oakland ought to be first in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Test, test, test.